Hello, my name is Reese Jackson, and today I'm going to be going over my reader response to Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens. Star Wars The Force Awakens, written by Lawrence Kasdan, J.J. Abrams, and Michael Arndt, is the seventh installment of the long-running Star Wars saga. It not only brings back characters that people knew and loved from the original trilogy, but it also ropes in a bunch of brand new characters for a brand new generation. That being said, there have been some criticisms lobbied against the screenplay, mainly because it's having to do with it catering to the nostalgia of the original trilogy. Nevertheless, the screenplay fits perfectly within Freitag's triangle and has an exposition, an inciting incident, the rising action, a climax, a reversal of fortune, a resolution, and a denouement. The first example of exposition in this story comes at the very beginning with the ever so iconic opening crawl, which explains what happened in the 30 years after Return of the Jedi, as well as setting up the plot involving a map that leads to the location of Luke Skywalker, who had mysteriously vanished. Another example is later on when on board the Millennium Falcon, Han Solo explains to both Finn and Rey what happened to Luke Skywalker when he disappeared and reintroduces the concept of the Force. The inciting incident in the story is when a stormtrooper named FN-2187 sees the destruction that the First Order does to a small village and decides to defect. He rescues the hotshot pilot Poe Dameron, who names him Finn, steals a TIE fighter, and ends up crash landing on the planet Jakku. The rising action occurs during the assault on Takodana, when Kylo Ren kidnaps Rey and uses the Force to question her about the location of the map. He did this earlier on in the story to the Resistance pilot Poe Dameron, who hid a piece of the map in his droid BB-8. The climax of the story centers on the Resistance forming a plan to destroy the First Order's ultimate weapon, Starkiller Base. Finn, Han, and Chewie infiltrate Starkiller Base to try to disable the shields so that the Resistance fleet can make their attack. Later on, there is some tension between the hero Rey and the villain Kylo Ren when Kylo learns that Rey is Force sensitive when she resisted his questioning, and is further fueled when Kylo kills Han Solo, who was later revealed to be his father, further angering Rey. The best example of reversal of fortune in The Force Awakens is at the very end when all the fates of the characters are indeed finalized. At the end, Starkiller Base is destroyed, Finn is in a coma after being mortally wounded by Kylo Ren, Rey bested Kylo in lightsaber combat, leaving him with a scar on his face. Even though the Resistance won that battle on Starkiller Base, they haven't yet won the war against the First Order. The resolution occurs when R2-D2, who had been deactivated after Luke's disappearance, reawakens and reveals to the entire Resistance that he indeed had the rest of the map all along. And together with the piece that BB-8 had, they finally find the location to where Luke had been hiding all this time, and it's in fact a remote island planet known as Ahch-To. And Rey goes with Chewie and the Millennium Falcon to find him. The denouement concerns the main protagonist, Rey. From the very beginning up until the very end of the story, she showed rapid progress. She was but a humble scavenger on Jakku, waiting for her family, who had abandoned her as a child, to return. Her encounter with BB-8 sets her off on a journey into eventually becoming a prodigy Jedi. She meets Finn, runs into Han Solo, who dies in front of her, encounters Kylo Ren, and finds Luke Skywalker and hands him his old lightsaber. To quote from this quote from the author of last name Morgan, her independence as a female character, especially in a sci-fi action film, sets her apart from previous representations found in most popular culture media. The Force Awakens is a decent story, but it is far from perfect. In fact, it's almost a carbon copy of Star Wars A New Hope. Both stories involve a small robot who hides secret plans from an evil empire and runs into a person living in a desert who finds out from a wise old mentor who was later killed off by a masked villain that they are special, and then escape into a ship with a rogue smuggler and joins a group of freedom fighters to pull off a plan that involves blowing up a planet-sized superweapon and ends in a climactic battle between the hero and villain and going to another planet and eventually be taught by an even wiser mentor. So, in conclusion, Star Wars The Force Awakens is a fascinating screenplay that tells a great story, though similar enough to the original, but nevertheless great. Sets up its characters and marks the start of a new generation for the Star Wars universe. It brings people back to a time when heroes and villains fought each other, there was no nastiness among certain fandoms, and myths became reality. Star Wars is, and always has been, a cultural icon, a universal mythology of heroes and villains, good and evil, and crucially, a movie where the good guys win. If you haven't read the screenplay yet, I highly recommend looking for it on the internet, either through Google or other search engines, whichever you prefer, because you will not regret reading it. Trust me, it is really good. And finally, here are all of the brilliant articles that I ever so lovely found and cited.